Hello everyone and welcome. I'm Kai, and in this entry in the Quran in Context series, we'll look at what famous Muslim Quranic commentators say about the Ark of the Covenant mentioned in the Quran. The Quranic verse referring to the Ark of the Covenant is Surah 2 verse 248, in connection to the biblical Saul going to war with the enemies of Israel. Quote, "And the Prophet said to them, Indeed, a sign of his kingship is that the chest will come to you in which is assurance from your Lord, and a remnant of what the family of Moses and the family of Aaron had left, carried by the angels. Indeed, in that is a sign for you, if you are believers." End quote. The biblical narrative can be found in the book of 1 Samuel. Quranic commentaries roughly fit into two overarching purposes. One, the need to fill in details because the Quran is vague, unclear, and incomplete. And two, to explain how to correctly understand the Quran, or in a broader sense, what Islam teaches. With regards to the Quran's mention of biblical characters, events, and certain things like the Ark of the Covenant, Muslim scholars have to consult non-Islamic sources, mainly what is known as Israeliyat, which is basically material that is purely Jewish and Christian in origin. A prime example of this is the attempt by Muslim scholars to identify which of his children Abraham was to sacrifice. Nowhere in the Quran is this child identified by name. For this reason, Muslim scholars have historically been divided over the issue. Some scholars explicitly followed the biblical tradition and accepted that Abraham was to sacrifice Isaac, while other scholars took the position that it was Ishmael. Muslim scholars also often rely on pure speculation. The reason can be as simple as there not existing any biblical account, or a conflict with the biblical account, or them not being familiar with the biblical account, yet they have to make sense of the Quranic verse. The most popular commentaries among Muslims are those of Tabari, Ibn Kathir, Qurtubi, Razi, and Jalalain. For illustrative purposes, we present here the commentary by Qurtubi with regard to the Ark of the Covenant, who himself relies on other commentaries, for example from Tabari. So what we find in Qurtubi's commentary is not strictly just his own musings. Our aim is not to be exhaustive and record every single commentary by every single commentator. Rather, we just want to illustrate the high degree of ignorance and speculation that exists within traditional Islamic scholarship. The reason Qurtubi is singled out to illustrate the point is because, apart from being well respected among Muslims, he's a rather late commentator, having lived during the 13th century, for a time in Spain in reasonable proximity to Christians and Jews, even participating in jihad against Christians, and then living out his life in Egypt. These elements allowed him to produce a mature and rich commentary in comparison to his predecessors, even if he appropriated much of their material. It also showcases how very little actual accurate knowledge of Christian and Jewish beliefs permeated Islam in the course of 6 centuries since the latter's inception up to that point. If one is Muslim and has no exposure whatsoever to correct Christian and Jewish beliefs, then what Qurtubi writes perhaps makes sense. However, for those who are Christians and Jews, what Qurtubi writes is just pure comedy. Qurtubi is a prime example of how unintelligible the Quran actually is on its own, as we'll now see. The following is the traditional Islamic understanding according to Qurtubi. The Ark, a tabut, was sent down to Adam, reached Jacob, and from then on remained with, quote-unquote, the tribe of Israel. The sign in the Ark is that from it could be heard a groan. It was only when the people heard the groan they would go out and fight. The Israelites fought with the Ark and were victorious, until they disobeyed Allah and the Ark was seized, having been defeated by the Amalekites, specifically Goliath and his people. A council among the Israelites then wanted a king and asked the Prophet at the time to give them one. They rejected Saul when the Prophet proclaimed him king and demanded a sign. Qurtubi is unaware that the Prophet referred to is Samuel. Afflictions befell the people who stole the Ark. 1. They put the Ark in a temple of theirs alongside idols, and the idols were overturned and broken in pieces. 2. They put the Ark in a village, and the people therein experienced neck pain. 3. They put the Ark in a lavatory, and the people suffered from hemorrhoids. The ark was returned to the Israelites in order to stop all the calamities. It was placed on a cart between two oxen and let loose on the land towards the Israelites. Allah sent angels to carry the ark to Saul, and the people saw the ark in the air. Then Joshua ben Nun placed the ark on the earth. The Sakina is a ruh, i.e. spirit, from Allah which spoke. It clarified whenever disagreements arose and shouted during war. It is described as 1. A wind like the face of a human being. 2. A gale with two heads. 3. Like a cat with two wings, a tail, and shining eyes, and would defeat enemies by looking at them. The relics inside the ark consisted of some combination of Moses' staff, garment, and sandals, Aaron's staff, garment, and turban, the tablets, manna, and the Torah. The ark contained within it the command to wage jihad, in recognition of Moses breaking the tablets as a result of the golden calf incident. Christians and Jews listening to this are undoubtedly laughing right now, because the Islamic understanding is an absolute clown show. Now, Muslims cannot claim that commentaries like Qurtubi's are correcting the biblical accounts because none of the stuff he brings up is in the Quran. None of it. It all stems from misunderstanding the biblical narratives and just making stuff up. Reality is the cold hard fact that the Bible corrects the Quran and Muslims. The Ark of the Covenant was not sent down to Adam, then reaching Jacob, and then remaining with the quote-unquote tribe of Israel. The ark was built by Bezalel after the exodus from Egypt and upon God's command to Moses to have the ark built. The ark did not groan. Rather, the people shouted. Quote, "And when the ark of the covenant of the Lord came into the camp, all Israel shouted so loudly that the earth shook. Now when the Philistines heard the noise of the shout, they said, 'What does the sound of this great shout in the camp of the Hebrews mean?' Then they understood that the ark of the Lord had come into the camp." End quote. It was the Philistines who stole the ark, not the Amalekites. Also, Goliath was not an Amalekite, he was a Philistine. The overturning and breaking of the idols and the ensuing afflictions reminds us of the narrative in 1 Samuel. Quote, "Then the Philistines took the ark of God and brought it from Ebenezer to Ashdod. When the Philistines took the ark of God, they brought it into the house of Dagon and set it by Dagon. And when the people of Ashdod arose early in the morning, there was Dagon fallen on its face to the earth before the ark of the Lord. So they took Dagon and set it in its place again. And when they arose early the next morning, there was Dagon fallen on its face to the ground before the ark of the Lord. The head of Dagon and both the palms of its hands were broken off on the threshold. Only Dagon's torso was left of it. Therefore neither the priests of Dagon nor any who come into Dagon's house tread on the threshold of Dagon in Ashdod to this day. But the hand of the Lord was heavy on the people of Ashdod, and he ravaged them and struck them with tumors, both Ashdod and its territory. And when the men of Ashdod saw how it was, they said, 'The ark of the God of Israel must not remain with us, for his hand is harsh toward us and Dagon our God.' Therefore they sent and gathered to themselves all the lords of the Philistines and said, 'What shall we do with the ark of the God of Israel?' And they answered, 'Let the ark of the God of Israel be carried away to Gath.' So they carried the ark of the God of Israel away. So it was, after they had carried it away, that the hand of the Lord was against the city with a very great destruction. And he struck the men of the city, both small and great, and tumors broke out on them. Therefore they sent the ark of God to Ekron. So it was, as the ark of God came to Ekron, that the Ekronites cried out, saying, 'They have brought the ark of the God of Israel to us, to kill us and our people.' So they sent and gathered together all the lords of the Philistines, and said, 'Send away the ark of the God of Israel, and let it go back to its own place, so that it does not kill us and our people.' For there was a deadly destruction throughout all the city. The hand of God was very heavy there, and the men who did not die were stricken with the tumors, and the cry of the city went up to heaven." End quote. Saul was proclaimed king by the prophet Samuel after the ark was returned to the Israelites, not before. the ark suspended between oxen, is confused with the story of Uzzah in the 2 Samuel. Quote, "So they set the ark of God on a new cart, and brought it out of the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill. And Uzzah and Ahio, the son of Abinadab, drove the new cart, and they brought it out of the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill, accompanying the ark of God. And Ahio went before the ark. Then David and all the house of Israel played music before the Lord on all kinds of instruments, of firwood, on harps, on stringed instruments, on tambourines, on sistrums, and on cymbals. And when they came to Nahon's threshing floor, Uzzah put out his hand to the ark of God and took hold of it, for the oxen stumbled. Then the anger of the Lord was aroused against Uzzah, and God struck him there for his error, and he died there by the ark of God." End quote. That the ark was carried by angels is the result of trying to make sense of the Quranic verse, because Muslims have no clue that the angels were the cherubim depicted physically atop the ark. That Joshua ben Nun, Moses' successor, is the one to put the ark on the ground is buffoonery at its best. This would mean that Joshua and Saul were contemporaries, not realizing that in reality hundreds of years separates them. That the Sakina is Ruh, or spirit, hints at the Shekhinah, the divine presence of God, and that the Sakina would speak is reminiscent of God speaking with Moses at the ark. So Muslim commentators were aware that Sakina was not just some bodily state a person experienced, for example, tranquility. Rather, Sakina was something literally sent by God. As for the various relics and the contents within the ark, here Muslims are just listing every possibility of which they can think. Remember, none of the Islamic commentary is detailed in the Quran. The point here is not to put forward the claim that Muslim commentators have to be infallible. The point is to demonstrate how abysmally wrong they are. Like, the word abysmal is too nice of a word. It's quite literally a clown show. The whole venture demonstrates just how unintelligible the Quran is when not read in its proper biblical context. It is not the Quran that corrects the Bible. No, dear Muslims. Rather, it is the Bible that informs understanding of the Quran and corrects it. So if you Muslims want to talk about corruption, then look at the Quran, because that is where the corruption is. It is lack of knowledge and understanding why Muhammad could not convince Jews and Christians to accept Islam and why he was seen as a fraud by them. Let's remind everyone what the Quran says. "So if you are in doubt, O Muhammad, about that which we have revealed to you, then ask those who have been reading the scripture before you. The truth has certainly come to you from your Lord, so never be among the doubters. And let the people of the gospel judge by what Allah has revealed therein. And whoever does not judge by what Allah has revealed, then it is those who are the defiantly disobedient." So when we as Christians do exactly as the Quran suggests, use our scripture to evaluate the truthfulness of Muhammad's prophetic claim, we conclude that Muhammad was a fraud.